and welcome to this webinar entitled Drafting Contract Terms for the Supply of Goods and Services Online. My name is Keith Markham. My background is I'm a company commercial lawyer, worked in a number of organisations where I've had to advise on these sorts of issues, hence why I'm here to talk to you about this today. As always, let's just have a look at the agenda for this session. Let's just get past my pretty picture there and instead look at the agenda. Excuse me. So we'll begin with a discussion of contract formation issues. That won't take very long, but essentially what we will do is just to remind ourselves of the age-old questions to do with invitations to treat and offer and acceptance, and look very briefly about how that typically will work in the context of an online contract. That's how we will begin. Then we will go on to look at the issue of incorporation of terms. We're all familiar with kind of the click and accept approach, but does that always work? What do you need to watch out for? We will see there's been a very, very recent case involving Betfred and a particular issue to do with them wishing to refuse to pay out nearly £1.7 million on a very large technicality to do with the content of their T's and C's. And there was an enormous issue in that case about whether those T's and C's have been effectively incorporated, as we will see. Then we will go on to spend a good chunk of time talking about this issue. Distance selling is something that's been with us in our law for more than 20 years now. Many of you will be familiar with this idea of a 14-day cooling off period, albeit as we will see, that 14-day period is not quite as straightforward as you might think. We will go through things like the definition of distance contract. We will look at pre-contract information and indeed confirmation requirements. We will look at performance. We will look at cancellation rights and look at various lessons that we can draw. And also we'll be looking at lots of sort of sample wording that you may want to use and insert in your own T's and C's, or indeed if you're acting for a consumer and looking for sort of weaknesses in the arguments of the trader that you are dealing with, you might look out for these things and say, well, that's not covered and this isn't covered, and so on. And the final thing that we'll look at very briefly at the end of this session today is the issue of e-commerce, and in particular information requirements when you are carrying out some form of e-commerce operation. Now, some of those overlap with the rules in distance selling, but not all of them. So we'll see there are two particularly important concepts: information society services and electronic contracting. And typically, if you're involved in online sales, particularly to consumers, you will be caught by both of those ideas. You are required to provide certain information and facilitate certain operations on the part of the consumer. So we will spend a good chunk of time talking about that just at the end.